pleased to be joined right now on the Arizona Sports Line by ESPN NFL analyst Field Yates. Field, thank you so much for the time, man. How's it going?
Hey, I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me on. Good morning to you both.
Yeah.
Good morning, Field.
Field, I guess let's just start here. Did anybody really stand out to you at the Combine at a position of need for the Arizona Cardinals?
I think it's important to note what the Combine is sort of geared towards and the players that are more likely to stand out versus others. But one that certainly does is Shamar Stewart, the Texas A&M pass rusher who, if you're a draft guru or anybody who just sort of follows SEC football, you're aware of the name and, frankly, the lack of production from Shamar Stewart. He had just 4.5 career sacks, exactly 1.5 in each of his 3 seasons at Texas A&M. You're probably also aware of the fact that this is my colleague Mel Kiper Jr. has this term that I'd like to borrow here. He is the captain of the LT Peters team, the look the parts team, because he cut 15 pounds from the Senior Bowl to the Combine to get down to 265 or 264 to be specific, and still managed to run a 4.6 40 and jump 40 inches in the vertical and 11 feet or so in the broad jump. So they don't make too many guys with better physical traits than Shamar Stewart. It was no surprise that he had a great Combine week. I do think he's going to go somewhere in the range of maybe as high as pick number 8 to Carolina, maybe as low as pick number 19 to Tampa. And with the Cardinals' need to continue to beef up the edge group, I think he will be a name that at least should be on their radar. It's going to take a bit of a leap of faith. It just is. You know, when you draft a guy with that little production in 3 college seasons, fairly or unfairly, it puts a lot of pressure on the scouting staff that makes that decision, because there are going to be other players that are available who have done it at the college level that there's just a little bit more certainty with those guys. That being said, Shamar Stewart, we might look back in 3 years from right now, and if he puts it all together, you might say to yourself, he was the best value in the entire first round, because I know this is a word that people sometimes hate, but the upside of Shamar Stewart is maybe as good as any pass rusher not named Abdul Carter in the entire draft.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that is good right there. What do you think the future of the Combine is, Field? You know, once again, with all these guys not working out or electing not to work out, not electing to run a 40, whatever it may be, what do you think the future is? And will the NFL and the NFLPA try to do anything to increase that participation?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot just because I had a blast at the Combine. I always do. It's a very important information gathering week for me. And there were some guys who, you know, either were players like Shamar Stewart who first-round talents with some questions to answer, or players who maybe we thought coming into the weekend were more late day 3 that become early day 3 guys because they just have such great physical testing that it forces you back to the tape. But I also recognize that if you were to ask an average football fan the 5 or 10 most compelling players in this upcoming draft class, you know, certainly the 3 that I think would be the first answers, probably the 4 would be Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, and Ashton Genty, the 4 of which combined to do nothing. And I don't blame them. I don't have any issue with them not doing it. Of course, I'd love to see all those guys work out in the entirety of the Combine, but what do they have to really gain from it is the question that they are all asking. And so I think there's a chance, and I'm not saying it's next year. It might not be 5 years from now, but there might be a chance that sometime in a decade or so, maybe a little less than that, who knows? At some point, the Combine is an opportunity for players to do their physicals and a Combine for players to have interviews with teams. That's about it.
Yep.
You know, and I just think it'd be hard for a player to make a case to not do those things, right? Those are benign. They are easy. It's just a matter of minutes. But whether that takes place somewhere in a centralized location or the NFL sort of builds out, you know, regional opportunities for these things to happen, I'm not sure of. But it does feel a bit different compared to where we were when, you know, we've seen guys at the highest levels of the draft, for lack of a better term, put on a show, and there's some excitement to that when it takes place at the Combine.
Yeah.
We're talking to Field Yates. Field, I just wanted to get your general philosophy on this because the Cardinals need offensive line help and they need a pass rush. They need help with the pass rush, too. Do you have a preference over the years of getting one of those through the draft and getting the other one through free agency with vets, or does it kind of vary based on the year?
What I will say is I think probably the right answer is it varies based off the year. But I feel like this is just my opinion, so reasonable minds that may feel differently, I'm willing to disagree with. We have seen such a slow draw on these offensive linemen in the NFL as rookies. Joe Alt last year from the Chargers was terrific, but J.C. Latham drafted just a couple of picks later to the Titans. It took much of last year for him to kind of become the expected version of himself. And Olu Fashanu for the Jets, who was not playing a whole lot early, took some time. I'm seeing more and more teams address offensive line play through veteran free agency or trades, even if the players have slightly lower ceilings than the potential of these rookies. You might rather have 5 B or B plus offensive linemen that you can count on just because it's so hard to find them and so much of their work is tied to what the rest of the offensive line is doing as well. So I think I probably would lean towards pass rushers in the draft just because I do think you might see a little bit more instant or early impact from them. But I also concede that when 16 comes around, if the Cardinals are indeed still picking at number 16, haven't moved up or down, if the board has fallen in a way in which, 5 pass rushers are already off the board and there's a good offensive tackle there or a good offensive guard there, I'm not going to turn my nose up to that opportunity either.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Field, you've got Aaron Rodgers, who's been released, Joey Bosa, Devontae Adams, Tyler Lockett. It just seems like, to me, big names, man. Do you recall big names like this getting released in the past?
No, I don't, and I think it's probably a reflection of a couple things. One might just be happenstance. It might just be kind of one of those quirky years where a lot of big names hit the market at the same time. I also wonder if part of what has happened is, we've seen this shift in the NFL, and I think we're seeing a lot of younger general managers and a lot more aggressive general managers, and we've seen a lot more trades in the NFL than I think we saw half a dozen years ago or a decade ago. I think one of the realities of that is that teams are willing to, as part of trades, facilitate them through contracts. And in some cases, the acquiring team is willing to push money into the future while acknowledging that, hey, it probably ain't going to look good in that last year or those last 2 years. The other thing about what's happening right now in the NFL, and I understand this, I'm not criticizing it in any way, shape, or form. This has always existed, but I do feel like it's more and more under the microscope is, when these contracts are negotiated for players, there is a desire, maybe from the player, maybe from the agency, maybe from the team, maybe from all of them, to be the highest paid or the largest deal ever by a wide receiver or a guard or a linebacker, whatever it might be. When the truth is that sometimes what's happening is you're seeing these deals where, the headline reads 4 years, $120 million, when the fine print might say, hey, it's the first 2 years or 2 years and, $50 million fully guaranteed. Right. But the last year is a $45 million non-guaranteed year that, for all intents and purposes, it's just basically to make the headline look a lot better. So I think we kind of had a couple of those, which was certainly the case of a player like Devontae Adams, who's still a really good guy, really good player, I should say. But, when the opportunity for the Jets is to save $30 million in cash and cap, for them, I think they probably view it as kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Field, it's always great to talk to you, man. Thank you so much.
Field.
All right, guys, take care.
All right, you too. That's Field Yates joining us right there on the Arizona Sports Line. I mean, he's always just
excellent,
so insightful when he
love talking to Field.
Certainly, even just when he's on ESPN.
Thanks for watching Wolf and Luke. Tap to see more and click the button in the middle to subscribe to Arizona Sports.